Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.
Hello, RailCats fans, and welcome back to another edition of RailCats Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Savetic, and we're about a week away from May 10th, the opening day of the American Association. The RailCats will play the Chicago Dogs at Impact Field. I was hoping to go, had tickets and everything for it, but I have to work, and I can't get around it. So, yeah, that kind of sucks. But at least I'll be there for the home opener on May 17th. Luckily, I worked around that schedule real quick. little update on life a little bit. I know I put out a tweet and a Facebook post that last week I had a job offering to go to Michigan to move up in my career. The issue is that the timing wasn't necessarily right and the income of it necessarily wasn't right. And outweighing the big stuff to the small stuff, there was no reason for us to necessarily go. And it's not saying that I won't have opportunities in where I'm at now to grow. And with that being said, my schedule is going to go back to normal in about 2 to 3 weeks. So hopefully I'll be able to go to a lot more games. I know my plans necessarily haven't changed for the summer because my plans were going to change and we may have to throw some stuff out, but I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about eating the $250 for family passes because I will be there most of the time. So I'm excited. I was hoping to do a preview, but my mind has been elsewhere outside of baseball. With big life changes, sometimes certain things get booted out, and this happened to be one of them. So I apologize for the lack of podcast and writing and all the other stuff, but big life decisions sometimes outweigh the hobbies and so on and so forth. So we're going to get to a bit of a season preview. And what I mean by the season preview, I know we've covered everybody that's been signed with the team. I've covered, I've had Lamar on here. I had Andrew Mild on here. I had Gio Diaz on. Like we kind of got an expectation from everyone that I have interviewed. We've done quite a bit around this team this year than I have in the past 2 years, I believe. I know it's a short little stint. But, rolling into year 3 of this, when looking at this team, no matter what the goal is the playoffs. And I just think right now this team just needs to make the playoffs. Where I'm not expecting, obviously every year you could put a team together to win the Miles Wolf Cup. It's very feasible to do that because you start with a brand new roster basically every year. Now you bring players back, obviously it's a big thing, but you're going to have to adapt and evolve. And I just think that this year we're going to see the adaptation and the involvement of what we're seeing already with Lamar Rodgers. And before I get into it, fun little story on my end, and I think a lot of you will get a kick out of this one. I definitely did. I was shocked by it. So the other day I'm at work, and a couple customers come up to me and they ask for a basketball system and they want to do a delivery assembly on the basketball system. I said, okay, yeah, sure, I'll help you out. And it didn't click to me. Well, so we're going through this, and I was like, I just need your name, and he gave me his name, and his last name's Olid, and I said, all right, this is just crazy coincidence. All right, it's not a common name you hear, right? I said, crazy question. I know it's off the wall, but do you? And I screwed it up at first. I was so nervous because I didn't want to say it, but I was like, Alex Olin? He goes, you mean Alec? I'm like, oh yeah, Alec. I was like, yeah. He goes, he's my son. So fun fact, I actually got to meet Alec Olin's parents them buying a basketball system and they ended up coming back and not doing the deliver and assembly, but I had to load a basketball system in the back of the vehicle for them. Great people, nice people, and I was nice to kind of like talk to them about the whole situation with Alec and being in Fargo and playing in the World Baseball Classic thing down in Mexico, and how he's with Taggart now and Tri City Valley Cats and that kind of stuff. And you just talked about Alec, Taggart being almost like a father figure to him and that kind of stuff. So like the special connection on that front of it, and I think there was a bit of a disappointment in their voice when when that he ended up having to leave and go to Fargo, and then so on and so forth. But no, just a little fun fact on that. That was interesting story I had, and I wanted to tell it, but I wasn't sure when or how I was going to tell it. So enough of that. Looking at this year, what now the big news right now is that Edward Cuello, Carlos Machado, and Jesus Mariaga are all on the inactive list, visa issues, and that's killer. It just kind of sucks that we have to go through this, but that's why we saw a handful of more people getting signed to the ball club. Because right now, when I think I did the math, there are I think technically 31 or 32 people, but obviously with the 3 inactive players, you can push over that limit of that. So what we have to see here is, I know there's a spring training game coming up, I believe the 4th in Schaumburg, which sadly I have to work, so I won't be going to that. And that's just the part that I really wish we were able, that the RailCats would do, is announce that kind of stuff. Because I granted, I get it, it could be one of those situations where you have to have people there, you have to have someone I get there's a whole bunch that goes into it. But if it was just simply you had one gate open, you however $9-10 or $5 or $4 or whatever the case may be, just to get in and watch a game, you don't have to have a concession stand open, you don't need to I think that would just, you don't have to have a full shindig for it. You're not going to have a whole handful of people. You may have a handful of people, you're not going to have a stadium full of people. But for instance, for like me, it would be nice to go to the game and know when the game is, so I can kind of plan around it, so that way I know what to be looking for, and see the battlement and see how the process works when we're doing these short little, that's the only thing that sucks about spring training technically, is you have like 3 or 4 games, 2 or 3 games really, and then bam, season starts. So a lot of these players, I think the players this year that it's really going to hurt is probably the infielders and the outfielders. Pitchers, and they're going to have a short stint, but I think it's easier over the course of 2 or 3 games to throw a bunch of people and to get an idea of kind of where they're at. The limited availability is going to be and the infielders and the outfielders. And I really think the hardest, when I'm looking at the infielders here, the people I believe that are probably going to be on the bubble for right now are probably going to be Jacob Bockley and probably Miguel Sierra. Now, Mikey Perez right now is sort of injured, so he may not make an appearance until later on, so that might open up a spot sliver there. I just don't know. Those would be like the bottom 2 on the cut line for me necessarily. I don't know. Obviously there's a connection with Sierra and Lamar Rogers in the aspect of playing in the Houston Astros organization. But I don't know. I don't see enough. I know what we're gonna get from Jose Contreras. I know what we're going to get from Jackson Valera. I know what we're going to get from Gio Diaz. We know what you can get from Basabi. So like that's one of those, like, you see a couple of those people and they're just kind of on the cut line and the cusp of potentially making the team. I just really think that the way Lamar Rogers likes to throw pitchers, that there obviously there's going to be more pitchers than there's going to be hitters, but I just think that if you give him a roster and you have a player that can play most of the if you give him a player that can back up in the infield, that can play a bunch of different positions, he is more than likely going to stay on the team as maybe a bench player versus someone that can maybe play one or potentially two. Now, like I said, Jacob Buckley has been in the American Association for a couple years. He was injured last year. Injuries, subtle behind the scene injuries, have hurt. It's hard to say, you know what, this is a defined roster. This is what it's going to come down to. When it comes to the outfielders, really, Jesus Mariaga, once he comes back, he's going to have a spot. LG Castillo is going to have a spot. Francisco Del Valle, I don't know if he's necessarily going to have a spot on the field, but he may have a spot in the lineup as a DH role. It's going to be interesting to see what you're going to get from Will Decker, Brendan Fields, and Carlos Rincon. Rincon gives power, but this is when I look at this roster, and Brandon Fields is a new speedster, and he's younger. He's a bit more raw talent just because he's coming from the draft league. Basically, he gives some pop, but he's going to give you that speed, and he's a lot younger than a Will Decker is. And if that's someone that you're going to need that needs to steal bases and can hit the ball, you may want to go a little bit younger on that aspect of it. But it's hard to, there's nothing that says, I have a month full of games to watch these players and say, yeah, you know what, this guy's going to take the spot over this one. That's why it's so hard to kind of do like what my opening day roster is necessarily going to be, because I don't know I don't know the players that are necessarily going to be on the roster, and I'm not going to be able to see where the players are playing, because I could say, you know what, Gio Diaz is going to be playing second base, and next thing I know, he's going to be playing third base on opening day. Like, you can't, I don't really know what you're going to get in that aspect. So it's kind of hard to take a roster and go, yeah, you're right, this is who's all going to be on it. I mean, heck, I could just say, theoretically, just take the catch, because there's only two in this spot, right? So the catchers are a lockdown, right? And then next thing you know, they release a handful of players and like, yeah, let's sign another catcher, and one of the catchers are already out. Like, I can't. There's no way of knowing who or what's going to happen to say this is the lineup and this is what you're going to expect, because we really don't know what to expect. It's going to be fun to play the game of who's going to do this and who's going to do that. So I'm hoping that a handful of games are going to be able to either I can listen to or be able to watch, which is also another great thing the American Association has done. I'm gonna kind of give my praise to the American Association on this front. Making games free on American or AATV is probably the best thing that they could have done. Now, when looking at it from a financial standpoint, I like to use the PWHL, for example. That's the Professional Women's Hockey League. They just started this year. So all of their games are free on YouTube, right? And if you live in Canada, it's all on the major networks up there. Making things free are going to bring not one people to start watching what's going on, but this is going to start bringing people to the ballpark because they want to be a part of the situation. This is going to open people's eyes to the situation. That's why I really hate when leagues, no matter if you are not a perfect let me rephrase this. If you are not the top of the top, if you're not the MLB, the NHL, the NBA, Uh, MLS is a little bit different because it's still not a big sport in America. Basketball, football. I mean, football. I mean, if you are not those kinds of top echelons, you should be able to bring people in and watch the product for free. The reason I think of it this way is because with having a bit of media background and understanding how sometimes the logistics behind it work, is just take the Super Bowl for example. Okay, companies pay millions of dollars for 30 seconds. Millions of dollars for 30 seconds. Even sometimes even 15 seconds. Yeah, I get you have to pay for cable, but in this aspect of it, you have to pay for internet. So essentially, you're paying for internet to watch a game. So essentially, you're paying something already. On top of like the 14.99 is great. You go back to the archives or whatever, you get to watch the. They've done a good job on that aspect of it. The thing is you make it free, you get more people to watch it, and let's just say for example, um, I know there was a talk about like New Balance doing uniforms for this year. I don't know if that's true or not, but you get that exposure to every team is wearing a New Balance uniform, or every team, a big sponsor corporate like Pepsi or Coke, like, would be the official drink of the American Association, so every ballpark has it. Or, for instance, like Gatorade, like every, it's sponsored by Gatorade. Like, you're gonna get those sponsorships, which can grow the league into something bigger. It's not like, for example, like the NHL and the AHL, right? Let's make it MLB aspect of it. So like you take the affiliate ranks, and they have their own platform that, let's just say, I don't know if they really do. I don't pay attention enough to affiliate ranks to like know what they have. If they have, like, I don't know, like a triple AATV or something like that, you know what I'm saying? And you have to pay a subscription that's maybe $100 a year to watch everything, right? This way, if they're already, how should I, they are already backed by the MLB. So if they're already backed, there's no reason they can, just make them have to pay for it. If people really want to watch it, they'll pay for it. Like, it is what it is. People are still going to come to the ballpark. We're backed by MLB. It's not that big of a deal. But as the American Association is trying to grow their, not grow their league and grow their talent pool, or what kind of talent if you make it free, you're going to get more people. And I think this is wonderful for the RailCats. I really do. You have a team that is based in a low income area. You have a team that most people are afraid to go to the ballpark because of the area you're in. Not necessarily, I shouldn't say most, because that's not necessarily true. I just think that the people that would want to go enjoy the baseball are hesitant on going because, one, they've probably never seen a game. Two, they've never probably gone because they have those assumptions that it's Gary and no one wants to go. This way, you're opening up the avenue of, oh, this is pretty good. I like, this is pretty good. I'm like how this is going. I like the talent level. I like this. I can go and see a game. What I really think they need to do, I fully get wanting people to watch on AATV. Like, I get it. I fully get it. But maybe just maybe, you open it up to Facebook, or maybe you open it up to YouTube. Because what you could do if you did it that way, you could still have the paid subscription AATV, but you get the archives. Versus Facebook and YouTube, you necessarily don't have to save those. so people can't necessarily watch it for free. That's not what I'm looking at. That's not what I'm going at right now. I'm just saying that making it accessible for everyone to watch that has internet is the greatest thing that they could have done. I am happy that they've done this because the product has been so well. There's really not much of a complaint even if I had to pay for it, because the subscription was great. It just kind of sucks that sometimes, when the season's over with, like, I have other finances I got to worry about. So I got to cut it out. So I don't get to go back and watch the games because I have to cut that out. Now, making it free, if it's going to be if it's going to all season long going to be free, and then I have to pay for the subscription outside of the season just to watch the archives, then okay, that's a little bit different, because I could take a month or two and I could spend $15 a month, 1 month, and go back and get everything that I need, or whatever the case may be. I'm just saying, this makes it great, and I really don't think there's much of a downside to the situation. It may bring better commercials. It may bring a better product because other teams are going to have to. This is free. There's going to be big sponsors watching. We're going to have to make things better because everything is. I think could help the league really grow itself on the media side of it, and raise that bar just a little bit further, but as the fans get to enjoy the product on the field. There's my rant of the American Association of TV. Not really a rant, more of a praise. I think they did a really good job on that. I hope it's here to stay to a certain extent. Good for them. And let's go back into the roster setup here. So looking at the roster, there's a lot of decisions. I know last year there were decisions that had to be made, but I really don't think the decisions were that. It was more of like, what are we going to do with our pitchers and what are we going to do with our catchers? The infield was sort of set. I think Gio Diaz came in and probably pushed a couple people out, maybe out of the infield or the outfield, and solidified a spot. But really, the outfield and the infield was basically set from the time the roster was constructed. And that was way back in December of that year, just because of the rules and different things like that. I just think this year you're seeing a little bit more, not more, well, you could say more talent, but more players with higher affiliated ranks expectations. And I just think that's a big positive. But there's also the sprinklement of a handful of players that necessarily didn't play in affiliate ranks to a certain extent. I look at a handful of these players, and I really like that Lamar Rogers has found pitchers that played in the Pioneer League and that has had success in the Pioneer League and brought them over, because unlike, when you look at a pitcher, his numbers are going to be inflated, and if we're looking at inflation, even by, just for simple math, even by half, right? So a pitcher has an ERA of 4. You take that by half, he's going to have a 2 ERA in the American Association. You would take that from batters. I would rather see a batter come from like the Frontier League, or if we're pulling from like partner league teams or independent, however you want to phrase it. If you're pulling from those, I would rather see like a Frontier batter or another league batter than I would prefer a Pioneer League batter. Granted, Gio Diaz was one of the highest, the highlights of last year, and him coming from Rocky Mountain, his numbers were higher, but realistically there wasn't much drop off. I think there was like a 0.2 drop off to what it was the year before. I think his average was like a 350, and however you want to spin it. I'm just saying, seeing like a Peyton Long from Rocky Mountain is a big one. Nate Alexander from Boise. I know not all of them are necessarily mountain height or whatever the case may be, but I'm just saying that this is a situation of, I would rather see pitchers that you're going to take a chance on from the affiliate ranks, or not the independent partner league areas that may not have affiliated experience. I would rather see them coming from the Pioneer League because hopefully the numbers are going to be a little bit different. Now, granted, you're going to be facing better hitters, but that's just that's where I'm coming from. So looking through the roster, these are a handful of players that I'm interested to see what you're going to get out of them this year. Franklin Perez, obviously being a highly sought after prospect in the Detroit Tigers organization, the one that got brought over from from Houston in the Verlander trade, having that arm injury, see where he can, or what's going to happen with him, see what happened. I'm interested in Peyton Long, just his numbers intrigue me. Ty Tiedemann and Nate Alexander, just because they were like the first two players signed. I'm interested to see what we're going to get with them. I'm interested in Guillermo Quintana, just because with him and with Cleburne last year, what he could be able to do this year with us. Mikey Perez, when he's better. Basabi, I'm interested to see what he can do. I can't necessarily the outfielders. I don't really have a player to watch in the outfielders except maybe Rincon. But outside of that, we kind of know what to expect from the other players. And I mean, Brandon Fields, but I just don't know who's going to make. I think maybe once the roster's finally set, then that's when I'll have an idea of what players are necessary to watch, who we expect, and who could be that jump that the Gio Diaz player of this year. Because Gio, I think he just surprised a lot of us, and I knew from the first time that I watched him play that there was something special with him. I just think it took some of the fan base a little bit longer, just because of the personal connections or the personal experiences with former players on the team that have been there for a handful of years. And that's why I kind of like to take a step back and not get myself invested in the aspect of wanting every player to succeed and rooting for every player, but not getting so hell-bent on just one player like I would if I'm watching the White Sox play. Like, I'm a big Andrew Vaughn fan, and I know he's struggling right now, but like, he is a player that if he's up to plate, like, I'm going to watch. Like, don't disturb me. That kind of aspect of it. Like, all these players, like, so what I'm saying is, if they were to get released or get traded, I can disconnect myself from the situation and understand it from the outside looking in, going, okay, I can see why this is. When I look at his numbers, it's easier to break those numbers apart and understand the situation. There was a handful of players last year that I said they're probably going to get released if they don't produce sooner, and that's what happened. Sam Abbott was a big one. I know he changed his swing. He probably didn't get the opportunities, but like, the opportunities here are a lot slimmer in these aspects of it. If it was playing in the MLB and having spring training, where there is a lot more games to potentially get your game going before they make the final decisions. You don't have that. You don't have that luxury. So like, you have to show up and show out quickly and fast, and then go from there. So it's just going to be interesting to see what the decisions are going to be made here. So looking at the roster, or looking at the schedule at the beginning of the schedule, and this is a big one. I think I think this is the first time in like 2 years that like the RailCats didn't play Kansas City in like the first two series. They don't wait until later on that aspect of it. But the RailCats start on the road with Chicago, and I know Chicago is going through a whole different roster rebuild, a whole different team. I don't necessarily. It's still going to be a punch for punch, and it's always going to be a punch for punch as long as they keep the playoffs as where they're at now, because only 2 teams don't make it, and all the teams can be equally as good. It's just depending on rosters and all the other different changes and wins and losses and wins and losses. But I'm just saying, like, it's hard to look at a roster and go, oh, they're going to be dominant, and them not be dominant. So like Chicago, I can look at the roster and I can break it down and look, and I really haven't had that opportunity to, just because of the last week or so. I really wasn't paying that much attention to it just because of the situation. But I mean, it is what it is. It just kind of sucks that like Milwaukee, they have 2 games back to back that are 11 o'clock games, which I may have to look at my schedule. I may be able to watch 1 or 2 of those just because I might be off during the week for that. But there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that opening up against Chicago is a good test, and then having Milwaukee, like, that's a good like 6-game stretch right off the bat to really not make or break your season. But it could also make or break your season to a certain extent, because you get to see the gauge between all the 2 teams that battled to make it to the Miles World Cup. Like, this is a good tester to see where you're at and where they're at. And then, Lake Country, I really think this year you really have to battle Lake Country and probably King County. Like, when those are you you either got to win the series or you got to sweep the series. Like, you can't get swept by Lake Country or King County. It just can't happen. There's just one of those situations where you can't get swept by them, and really you can't lose any series against them. Like, those are the teams that you should be circling on your calendar. Like, these are must-win games. You have to, like, obviously every game's must-win to a certain extent, but I'm just saying we don't want, like, for example, May 23rd to the 26th. At King County, that's 4 games. Like, it's an away game, so the goal is to split, right? When you're away, you want to split. If you lose 3 of 4 of those games, or you lose all 4 of those games, that's going to really hinder you in that situation, and we can't let that happen. So, like, these are big games coming around, and just looking at the aspect of you have to really take those games into consideration. On the west side, I don't really take I can't really say in those situations. I know the East struggled against the West last year, and the RailCats kind of struggled against the West a little bit. Those are just games that you're gonna have to play, and you're gonna want to win the series for it. Sorry, my eyes are watery. Allergies are all over the place. But it's just one of those situations where you're gonna have to win a lot of games and have good series. You can't go on cold spells. You can't go on you win 3, you lose 7 in a row. Like, you gotta have the mentality of, all right, just gonna win this series, win it 2 games. I just gotta win 2 games out of 3. You gotta win 2 games out of 3, or I gotta win 3 games out of 4. Or maybe just win 2 games out of 4. Split those 4-game series, and you're constantly winning. You don't want to have too many peaks with too many valleys, or you don't want to have too many valleys and not enough peaks. So, like, it's just one of those, you need that nice easy the wave through the year. You don't, highs and high, if you keep going high and high and high and you have a little drop, then you keep, like, that's fine. You ride that high wave all the way through, but, like, you can't hit that high wave at the beginning of the year and then just completely drop and not be able to compete for anything. So it's just gonna be interesting to see where this team's gonna end up at the All-Star break, and where we're gonna end up on that aspect of it. So I think having 6 games away is a nice thing, and I'm glad this year, because I know they did it last year. They started the games on Saturday, which kind of mimics the MLB, where they have a game on opening day. Like, it could be on a Thursday, then they have Friday off, and like that's different. Like, this, you have to set the league up for success. You have to set your teams up for success. Start it on a Friday, because you're going to get people to come to the ballpark on a Friday night. Like, it's opening day on Friday night. Oh, it's Friday night. I have nothing to do on Saturday. I'll come to a game. You start on a Thursday. Oh, I got to work the next day. I really don't want to go. It's not. It would be different, if you did a Thursday, like how most MLB, a Thursday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not those kind of situations. You have to bring people to the ballpark, and I think that was the biggest complaint that I had last year with opening day was they started on a Thursday, started on a Friday, start the games on a Friday. That would be a lot better if you just start them on a Friday. It is what it is. Just let it be on a Friday. But yeah, I think I kind of covered everything I wanted to cover. I know I'll probably have a podcast come out next week before the game, just to kind of give like a series preview. Maybe I'll look at the Dogs roster and really break it down and kind of look at it, and see what to kind of expect, or if we get any games on Mixler or AATV to kind of hear what goes on. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one. I don't know what or how I'm gonna do it, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to still be here and not be moving, even though moving would have been nice to a certain extent. But I love doing this, so it was gonna be very hard to give this up. And it was not saying that I would have given it up when I went over there. It would just been really difficult at the first half of the season to really do any of this, because I would have been, it would have just been a disaster. I would have probably had to take a year hiatus on doing it, but luckily I don't have to. So yeah, there's that. Enough of that. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, rest of your evening, whenever you're watching this, and go Cats.
The 0-2. Swing and a miss, strike three. Wrap this one up in green and white.